ayat number 34 about the beating of women. Maybe I not understand properly, or please guide me about this. Thank you.
I think he's talking about Surah 434, Surah An-Nisa.
Yeah.
So what is okay?
Yes.
Fine. Yeah, I think
My
Brother
question
Daniel.
is, can
We got your question, brother.
can
Let's see if Brother Daniel wants to answer that or just briefly comment on it.
Yeah, we can answer that question. So this ayah, I actually cited. Can you actually mute your mic, because I hear a lot of background noise?
Okay.
Okay. So I began reciting the beginning part of it. Al-rijalu qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa. This is the 34th verse of ayah of Surah An-Nisa. And in the latter part of the ayah, it talks about this concept of nushuz. Nushuz, there are different commentaries on it, but it basically can be translated as a type of rebellion or a type of aggressiveness, haughtiness, attitude of the wife towards the husband. So then the ayah gives some steps, and Allah gives some steps in how to address this. Okay, so there are different translations. Some say that try to convince them. Okay, try to convince them and then leave them apart, leave them in their beds. Okay, so separate from them. And then the third measure, if they still do not comply after that, then the third measure has to do with darb. Darb means to strike. Darb means to strike. And what the critics of Islam say is that this is domestic violence that's sanctioned in the Quran. And this shows how Islam is a violent religion. This is a barbaric religion, because your holy book is saying that, is giving license to men to strike women, okay, their spouses. How can this be a religion of peace? How can this be a religion of mercy? How can this blah, 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 etc.? Okay, so we see a lot of these kinds of critiques. How do we address it? Some of the modernists and reformists will say that no, darb, when Allah says wadribuhunna, this is not referring to striking. This is referring to something else. This is referring to maybe you have to distance yourself or travel. They give some kind of explanation, but these are explanations are just apologetics that have no basis in the Quran, and they have no basis in the tafsir, the explanation of the Quran, and they have no basis in the fiqh, because all scholars have given men this kind of license. Okay, traditionally, it's only modernists who have said that, who have tried to reinterpret and reform this ayah. But what is the wisdom and what is the reality of this kind of practice? Let me give you a scenario. You have in the, let's say, the workplace, a woman who comes and she's had a bad day. Her work performance has really dropped off, and she's becoming abusive in the workplace. She's insulting her coworkers. She's causing a big scene. And her manager says, look, this was your last warning. We have to let you go. You can't continue to work here. And she gets really angry. She starts throwing things. She starts smashing tables, smashing dishes or tables and so forth. And they have to call security. The security guard comes and physically restrains her. And she struggles. She hits the police. The police have to hit her back and restrain her because of this kind of behavior. Okay, does anyone have a problem with this? Is this a kind of immoral situation? No. Okay, I don't think anyone has a problem. Any other situation on the street? Okay, a woman is illegally parked. The police come and give her a ticket, like a parking ticket for her illegally parked car. She gets angry. She starts throwing things. She starts hitting the police officer, and he has to fight back. He has to restrain her. Is there any problem? Do we have any problem with the idea that the law would apply equally in terms of its force to men and women? No, no one has a problem with this, right? In fact, it's necessary. Women can't be allowed to be violent, to cause destruction, to cause harm, and to violate the law there has to be a way to restrain that. And that's completely recognized and understood within the Western legal system. Within the Western legal system, right? So what difference does that is made, okay, if that authority to restrict harmful, destructive behavior is given to the authority within a household, which is the husband? What difference does that make? In fact, Islam is putting the authority to restrain a abusive or a someone who is a woman who is acting in violation of morality and ethics. Islam is giving that authority for restraint and reaction, giving that authority and force to the person who cares about her the most, her husband. Isn't that correct? Isn't this the mercy of Islam? That Islam is allowing that authority for the husband, as opposed to the state, as opposed to a police force, as opposed to a bureaucratic system of technocratic system to control and keep people in line. This is the system of Islam, where there are different domains. Women are prevented from the public domain and they're kept in the domestic domain. But in Islam, the domestic domain is extremely important. And much of what is important about Islamic living and Islamic life happens in the domestic domain. And men are authorities in that domain. And they have these kinds of responsibilities and duties. And therefore, they're given that kind of authority as well, to physically restrain. This is not a license for abuse. This is not a license for physically harming. This is not a license for anything that is going to actually cause physical harm. And that's very clear in Islamic law. And the classical scholars said that you're not allowed to leave a mark. You are not allowed to hit the face. You are not allowed to cause actual physical damage to your wife. But you do, as the authority within the household, you do have a physical authority as well. That's part of being authority. You cannot be an authority unless you have a mandate to physically use that. Do you have to use it responsibly? Yes. Are there consequences for misusing it? Yes. There are consequences for misusing that kind of authority, but that kind of authority is necessary within the household, okay? And within the Islamic system. And if you take away that authority, you basically mean that men have no authority in marriage, or there can't be authority without the ability to use force. Authority would not exist. The authority that exists in secular society is all monopolized by a centralized, bureaucratic, technocratic state. All authority within society. Islam does not have that kind of system. Islam gives authority to the family domain, to the community domain with the imam and the emir, to the national, on the civilizational and national scale with the khalifa or the sultan. Okay? There is decentralized authority, and you can only authority is only meaningful if it has the ability to use at times force if necessary, and within a very prescribed and controlled manner. And so there is actually great mercy and benefit that the people who are in charge and able to apply that authority and that force for women in Islam is the person who loves her the most, cares for her the most, is most interested in protecting her, which is her own husband. As opposed to women who are thrown into cop cars, thrown into jails, are abused and by the muscular, secular surveillance police state. Now, one might say, well, why doesn't the woman have the authority to hit her husband? No, that wouldn't work. That wouldn't work. One, because women are not physically capable to do that. And women themselves are not interested in being authorities. If you ask women, would you rather marry a man who is bigger than you and stronger than you, or a man who's weaker than you and smaller than you, they will universally, even the feminists, will say that they prefer to marry a bigger and stronger man. That's their preference. So, and in fact, women biologically would not be attracted to men, to a husband who is weaker than her and smaller than her. And this is a biological fact. This goes to the topic of hypergamy, which we didn't really touch on today, but it's a big topic. So this is the perfect Islamic system, and there's great wisdom in why, in this ayah, and why men have been given the authority to, if necessary, in the rare cases that is necessary, and in the vast majority of Muslim marriages, it's never an issue. It's only in the case of nushuz, which is a big problem that can dissolve and destroy a marriage. Islam says that no, there's a prevention of this, and that's through physical show of physical force, because that actually will resolve the situation. Now, if there are men who abuse women, guess who takes care of that? The woman's male family members, her brothers, her father, her uncles, her grandfather. All of these people are there to make sure that she is not being violated and abused. And this is a very important system that we find not only in Muslim societies, but even in non-Muslim societies. And there's a movie, classical movie called The Godfather, and it shows this kind of Sicilian crime family. And they have a scene in this movie where the daughter of the kingpin or the godfather, she's married to this guy, and she comes to her father, and she happens to have a black eye. And then her brothers see this and say, did your husband do this to you? Did your husband give you a black eye? And she doesn't want to say yes, because she knows what's going to happen. Those brothers race to her husband's house, and they take care of him in a very brutal way to teach him a lesson, of this kind of behavior against their sister. So we can talk very long about this ayah, but this is not something that we should be ashamed of. This ayah is a verse of the Quran from Allah, and we should be proud of every ayah of the Quran. And this is more evidence of the hikmah and the wisdom that is found in Islam. But people who have been deluded by a modernist system that is destroying humanity, is destroying families, is destroying marriages, people who have been indoctrinated by that may not appreciate this ayah and many other practices within Islam, but we should be able to explain it and take people through a deprogramming process so that they can understand the reality of the way human life has been and the way that people practice and live in a way that they can flourish in the dunya and in the akhirah.
Jazakallah khairan, brother.
I mean, I'm sorry I'm speaking a long time on this, but this is a very loaded question that requires even more time to do it justice.
Absolutely. And also the next ayah is very important. I think people actually do not look at the next ayah in that same. So after 434 comes 435, and Allah is actually encouraging reconciliation between the couple. Okay, so it's not the main idea is like Ustad Daniel stated quite eloquently, is to make sure that the marriage remains and there's no split in the marriage, and even that striking of the spouse is something as a last resort. But the whole purpose of that injunction is so that the marriage doesn't break. They might have children, they might have the two families will actually break apart as well. So there's a lot of consequences. So what is more important, to save a marriage or something else, in that situation? So please take that into consideration as well. Jazakallah khair.
This is something that is also discussed by non-Muslims psychologically, is you'll have women who they have this kind of instinct to test their partner, to test their boyfriend or their husband, because they want to see if he will rise to the test. This is exactly what nushuz is they will start abusing him and shouting at him, diminishing him, belittling him. And this is exactly what nushuz is, in order to test him. And if he kind of withers away and shows that he is not really able to handle it, then she leaves him, or she's disgusted by that and not attracted to him. But if he reacts in a way that is strong and he puts a stop to it, then this actually turns out to be very attractive to women. And again, this is all backed by studies, and a lot of non-Muslims actually talk about this kind of interaction with the opposite sex. So Islam is basically showing that men need to be men and women need to be women. And as horrified as a secular feminist might be to hear that, that's the reality. It has to do with human nature, and Islam has put in place a perfect system that accounts for the differences of human nature and makes sure that ultimately human beings are flourishing, families are flourishing. If you start taking away the man's authority in a marriage and you don't allow him to have this kind of ability to use force if necessary to restrain his wife, because strike doesn't necessarily mean just a hit, but sometimes to restrain, like stop, or this is enough, again, without causing harm or leaving marks or hitting the face. If you take away that authority, that means the man doesn't really have authority. He can't really be in charge of that marriage, and that leads to a much weaker marriage because women are not attracted to that. Women are not attracted to a man of equal ability. They are sexually attracted to men who are stronger and who are in charge and are in control. Even if they might not admit it explicitly because of feminism, the studies are showing that even the most feminist women like macho men, like strong men. And this is what is going to lead to a stable, happy marriage. If we have a society where that doesn't exist, it's going to be worse for women. It's going to be harder for women. They're going to be more dissatisfied, and they don't even know it. Allah has prescribed something for you, and you think it's bad, but it's really good for you. And you think that there's something that's good, but it's really bad for you. This is the myopia and finite knowledge of a human being.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Naveed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair.
Wait, before you go.
Don't go yet.
Yes.
Don't go yet. I want your honest opinion. Do you agree with that, or do you have an objection to that?
No, I'm 100% agree with you. Jazakallah. Actually, I have put this question because of that atheist channel, and they always put that ayah. And when I study Quran in translation and in Urdu, it is written that you can beat the woman. So I was confused, and thanks to Allah Ta'ala that you have answered this question very briefly, and my concepts are clear very well. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair.
Just wanted to add a point there, of course, because Brother Daniel could have elaborated even further, but that's not the topic. The whole Quranic prescription is totally antithetical to domestic violence, because what happens in domestic violence is this: when a partner, or be either a husband or a boyfriend, comes and sees this, the nushuz, this rebellion from his partner or a wife or a girlfriend, he immediately gets angry, and with this anger, he starts hitting, and that's where the domestic violence comes from. But if you look at it, Quranic prescription is in particular order. You don't, we are told not to violate this order, the sequence that is there prescribed to reconcile this problem. The first thing and the foremost thing is that, you do not just go and physically hit someone. Implicitly, this saying, you control your anger and you start conversing with her. You admonish her. So basically, it's all about, you admonish, you do wa'ad, you engage in a discussion saying what you're doing is wrong. So that really shows from the very beginning, from the very outset, it is stopping you from, getting hot-blooded and in your anger to cause any harm to her. Rather, it's saying simply, no, you control yourself and you mutually discuss that what is going on, what she's doing is not right, it's not appropriate, it's not something that is good for the marriage. And on this note, then of course, if she, agrees to that, and then the problem solves. There's no problem anymore. The issue is resolved. If she persists on that, then of course it goes into second prescription, and then third prescription, and so on and so forth. So those people who think that Islam encourages domestic violence from this verse is totally opposite to what you think. Jazakallah khairan for answering this beautifully, Brother Ustad Daniel. And I hope, Brother Naveed has got his answer. Jahangir Bhatt, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me, brothers. I have some question, but I wasn't even sure if this is the right show for that question. So basically, my concern is that I'm actually married to a person who is not biologically a woman, but we are in a civil marriage, and she's considered a woman. But I'm not sure as because I'm a Muslim from Islamic perspective. I know that